Hey, it's Dr. Darren Schmidt at the Nutritional Healing Center of Ann Arbor. I have three mold stories I want to share with you, and the last one is related to lactic acidosis. I haven't talked about lactic acidosis in a while. It hasn't really caught on. It's uh, it's the mechanism of chronic disease. I did many videos about this when I read old nutrition and medical textbooks and medical nutrition recommendations from prior to 1960. But let me just share these mold stories first. And the first one is a woman I talked to on the phone, and her house is on a slab, no basement, no crawl space, and the concrete's maybe like 6 inches thick, and the plumbing underneath her house broke, so the sewage was leaking into the soil from the pipe, and it became a big sewage um, cesspool under her house, leaching up through the concrete slab into the carpet, and it affected. I think it was three bedrooms and part of a hallway. And she was wondering why the one room always smelled funny. Maybe it's the dog. Maybe the dog peed on the carpet or something like that. And she lived in this house, and it was like 15 years, and her health crashed down, and her kids' health was bad. And so I'm saying this because it's interesting because when you she pulled up the carpet once and she saw stains, and it just took a while to put two and two together. When you're looking for mold and you're looking for how safe is your house, you got to be a detective, and you got to use your nose and trust your instincts. And if you see a dark circle on the carpet and it's not from the dog or whatever, you have to suspect and do some more investigation and keep looking. When you look past drywall, you may have to bust through the wall and look on the other side of the wall, especially in the basement. So I'm just sharing this with you because it's super interesting. And she was able to find it, and now she's on the path to health again. Okay, the next person, I got my little notes here. Um, this other guy, I think he's 80 or 81 years old, and he's been remodeling homes for a long, long time. And his current house has mold in the basement. Now, the house is relatively new, but the basement is from 1850 or somewhere in there. Um, Now, in Michigan, we have what's called the Michigan basement, which is a dirt floor and then rocks that are large, uh, held together with concrete. So water can leak in or water can leak up. And basements are just an absolute disaster. And, I actually had another woman, this is from before, this is from a long time ago. She got arsenic poisoning from her Michigan basement, and it was all tested and verified. And she had mold in the house too, but she had to seal up her basement with plastic. So, anyways, this gentleman that I'm referring to, um, his wife moved into the RV this summer in the driveway, and all of her stomach pain went away. And but he still has been sleeping in the bedroom in the house, and he can't get his breath. He has a hard time breathing. In the house, he can maybe walk 10 steps, and then he has to sit down. He's completely out of breath. Well, in this new office where I'm at now, he walked from the front door, from the parking lot through the front door, all the way to the back where my one of my treatment rooms is. And I counted the steps, it's 50 steps. And he was totally fine because we don't have any spores floating around in the air here, whereas he does in the house. So now he's, like I said, he's a home remodeler. He still works. And we talked more about this, and he says 70 to 80% of the homes that he works on have mold. It's usually in the kitchen or it's in the bathroom. And it's usually under the cupboards or behind the cabinets or maybe behind the shower wall. And sometimes it's gray, sometimes it's green, most of the time it's black. So this is Michigan. If you're living in the desert, it's going to be less than that. If you live in a more humid place, it might be more. I remember walking last time I was in Seattle, it was a year ago. I'm walking with my girlfriend from the hotel to Starbucks. I don't drink coffee, but she likes coffee. And I couldn't believe the houses had this much, um, what's the term? Lichen on the rooftops, this thick. And it's like, man, inside there, it's got to be filled with spores. floating in the air. Okay, so I'm just giving you information so you can, when you look at your house, you got to look like in the basement, in the attic, on top of the roof, on just look everywhere and use your nose. Okay, and you might want to hire a professional to test. Okay, um, so the third story and the last story is a woman who is a nurse at a dialysis center, and her husband are the only nurses in this center. So they open and they close, and they spend many hours there per week, many hours. And she said when she opens the door first thing in the morning, she just gets hit with mold and that mildewy smell. It's disgusting, and it's because the pipes keep breaking. The construction of the building originally was very lame, and once a month there's a burst of water coming through a pipe, and it gets into the drywall, gets into the carpet, gets into the padding, and mold is constantly growing, and she's in a very hot, humid environment anyways. So she's been dealing with that, and I said, you got to get out. And of course, the hospital isn't going to fix it. I just keep remembering all these mold stories. I have another woman that works in the basement of a hospital, and she's a physical therapist. And the hospital knows that there's mold in there. And she comes home after her shift. Let's say she comes home at 2 o'clock. She is out for 2 hours. She's on the couch. She's trying to recover. And then by four, maybe five, she's back. She's got her energy back. So if you come home from work and you are completely exhausted, and then 2 hours later, you got your energy back, there's something at work and it's getting into your body. So, and it takes a couple hours for your body to get rid of it. In my old office with the mold, I would get into the car and roll down the windows and turn on the air conditioning and just start breathing as much as I could to get my air back. Okay, so, anyways, getting back to this woman, the dialysis nurse, um, she found a strange pattern occurring with patients. And so they draw the blood to clean the blood for these dialysis patients. And there's two chambers in the machine. And the second chamber has a little centrifuge. And the point of the second chamber is to make sure there's no air in the blood, because you don't want an embolism going back into the body, causing a cardiovascular event, a stroke, or something like that. So now some patients had um, the blood would separate in the centrifuge. It was as if there was something weird in the blood, something that made the blood heavy and light, whereas all the other patients, their blood didn't separate. So she started reading through the histories, and those patients were actually diagnosed in the medical field with having mold, and it was only those patients. And so she kept her eye out for these patients, and kept looking at histories and trying to put two and two together. And then she found something very interesting, that these people had high lactate. So lactic acidosis, it's dirty blood with it's got lactate in it and other chemicals and a low amount of oxygen. You got to just see here. I put a playlist right here. I'll put a playlist right here when this is done. But so if your lactate is below 3, you're fine, especially if it's below 1. Now, if you're exercising and you're doing endurance running or something, it can go to 3.84 and higher, and that's normal because you're breaking down muscle and you're using a lot of oxygen, you run out of breath, that's just all normal. But when your body's filled with poisons like mold spores, now your body's running out of breath and you're just sitting there. So these dialysis patients, their lactate will go up to 25, and they're near death, and they have kidney failure, and they have mold, and the doctors are just like, what do you do? They don't know what to do. So in medicine, they have two options. One is called DCA. It's a drug. It lowers the acidity of lactic acidosis, but it doesn't have any clinical benefit whatsoever. It doesn't extend lifespan even by a day. And the other option is baking soda. And they've researched this in critical care units and emergency rooms and all that stuff. And yeah, it can lower the acidity in your blood, but it doesn't help the body because you got to fix the cause. You got to clean up the mold and the spores. You got to repair the organs. It's the holistic viewpoint from head to toe. Just imagine all your blood is dirty. It's not just the blood in your lungs, or not just the blood in your heart. It's all the blood. So from day one, from the beginning, you got to look at this holistically, and as opposed to 3 days before death in the ER, when finally lactate is at 25. And that brings me to another subject, is that our bodies have all these mechanisms to keep the lactate down. And when one of those mechanisms breaks, there's another one, there's a backup and another backup. Well, finally, at some point, all the mechanisms are broken to prevent lactic acidosis, and the lactate goes shooting straight up. So then at that point, the research shows over and over again that the rates of infection are higher, lifespan is shorter, hospital stays are longer, the need for medications is greater. It's just a sign of being near the end. So, but we know how to reverse engineer it, and there's not a single drug that can reverse engineer this. So, I brought some of my favorite supplements for killing mold. I've talked about these before. There's no surprise when I show you what these are. This is ADP, for it's oregano, and yeah, that kills the mold. Okay, now remember, like, when you have mold, let's say growing on the wall or behind the wall, it releases spores, and the spores carry mycotoxins. So you breathe it in, and then the mycotoxins kill your cells, and then the spores grow. That's life, that's Mother Nature. The mold wants you on the floor, just like a tree fallen in the woods, and then you got mushrooms growing on it. You're just the next tree when it comes to mold. It wants you down. So I've talked to so many people, and I experienced this once before too myself, when I felt like I was gonna fall down and I had no pain. It wasn't like I had back pain or something. So, but yeah, I've talked to a lot of people where, they collapse in the shower. They got all the steam going, it's hot, the mold loves it, and now they're on their knees in the shower, or somebody's walking down the sidewalk and they just collapse. So that's mold. And of course, that collapse could be from other things. But the other, so we got ADP for killing. That's oregano, and there's going to be other products that can kill too. That's just one I'm familiar with. I've been working with that for 20 years, and it works all the time. I'm currently on it now too. And then Spanish black radish. That's the cleaner for drainage. That's the term I like to use. It cleans out the bad mold. And then we got biotoxin binder. And so bio means life, toxin. So this is the toxins that come from life. That's mold, that's the spores and the mycotoxins. And it binds this, and this is fantastic stuff. And I told the story before. I was taking two before bed, and I wake up in the morning and I'd be like, oh man, I felt horrible. I didn't want to get out of bed. But then by 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, that same day, I felt fantastic. And so there's that. So I see a bunch of people are commenting, "Hi." Yeah, "Hi. I'm reading all this." Alright, cool. So, um, I think that's all I wanted to say, and, I appreciate you watching. I have fun on YouTube most of the time. There's people who really challenge me, and I learn from them, and there's people who are jerks, and I just delete them and block them. And I have what I call the YouTube graveyard. I have a list of people I can see who I block. But you can challenge me on comments and questions, and show me research and all that stuff, and be polite, and everybody can get along. But if somebody's a jerk, I just block them. So